going on, friends? Harley-Davidson dealers have pretty much forgotten about the Twin Cam 103 at this point. But don't kid yourself. The Twin Cam 103 is still a really good engine, even when you compare it to the Milwaukee 8. Now, you might think the Milwaukee 8, yeah, it has more displacement, more this, more that. But don't kid yourself. The Twin Cam 103 really isn't that far off from the Milwaukee 8. The Twin Cam 103 really has to be one of my favorite engines from the Twin Cam line, especially the later models. Now, don't get me wrong, all the Twin Cam engines are really good, but the 103 there towards the end, that is right about the time period where Harley-Davidson finally got it right. And they really did well with the 2014 and later Rushmore project models when they came out with the Twin Cam 103HO and they went to that 511 lift cam. That really made a big difference in the horsepower and torque output from the stock engine. Before we get too far in today's video, guys, please don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. But it seems like everything today is all about the Milwaukee 8 engine. Yes, it is a great motor. That engine can really lay down some power. But just my personal opinion, that engine just lacks some of the character that you got from the Twin Cam and the Evo. And of course even the shovel head, but nothing really compares to the shovel head. Now, one of the first issues when it comes to just the overall feel of the bike with the Milwaukee 8s, yes, they're great motors, but a lot of riders agree they really made the bike too smooth. It doesn't have that rubber mounted feel, that raw shaking of the engine like you got with the Twin Cam models when they were rubber mounted in the touring bikes and in the Dyna line. But feeling and personal preference aside, I do understand that the Twin Cam 103 just has some areas where it's never going to be the Milwaukee 8. The Twin Cam does not have a 4-valve head. It has a 2-valve head, and that becomes very apparent when you start adding cams into these bikes. But let's be realistic here. With a Twin Cam 103 or even a Milwaukee 8, just about every bike you see is going to have exhaust, tuner, and an air cleaner. But very few go to actually putting the cam in the bike, and even fewer go further to put in a big bore kit to heads and injectors. There are some of those bikes out there, but you're not going to see a lot of them out at your local bike night. So being very realistic, how does a Stage 1 Twin Cam 103 compare to the Milwaukee 8 107? And we're going to take a look at some numbers here at what the 107, the 114, and even the 117 put out compared to a Twin Cam 103 that has just been tuned and only has a set of slip-on exhaust. Maybe true duals, 2-in-1, but a high-performance air cleaner on it, and above all, that good tune. The power output may actually really surprise you. It's not that far off the Milwaukee 8. Now guys, a bone stock Milwaukee 8 mil, this is putting out about 85 horsepower and roughly about 98 foot-pounds of torque. That's really good power right out of the box. And right there, you're really seeing that 4-valve head and that increased displacement over the 103. Now, of course, your basic 103, the non-HO version, you're getting about 70 horsepower and roughly about 85 foot-pounds of torque. But if you remember how I said the Rushmore project with the 511 cam made a big difference, these are the bone stock numbers for a 103HO. For the bone stock 103HO, we're making 77 horsepower and 92 foot-pounds of torque. Now, this really isn't that far off of what a bone stock Milwaukee 8 is making if you're getting a 2014 or later model that has the factory high-flow air cleaner and the 511 cams in it. This is completely stock. Now, the interesting thing about the Milwaukee 8 is that when you put exhaust systems on them, it's not this huge gain like we would see with the Twin Cam models. So just a Milwaukee 8 107, you got it, you go ahead and put an air cleaner on it, you put a set of slip-ons on it, and you tune it. This is what I like to call your run-of-the-mill bike. This is what you're going to see the most of out there. On the Milwaukee 8 107, you're going to go to about 83 horsepower and a little over 100 foot-pounds of torque. So not a bad gain, but being the 4-valve head and everything else, I would kind of expect to see a little bit more than that. Now, a 103 HO with a high-performance air cleaner, a good slip-on exhaust, and a good tune, you're looking at 83 horsepower and 95 foot-pounds of torque. Now, you are seeing that increased displacement over the 103, but it's really not that big of a difference. I mean, it is a gap given the displacement in the 4-valve head, but in considering the fact that the 103 HO is so much cheaper than the Milwaukee 8 when you're looking at the used market, well, everything's expensive right now. But with a 103 HO, you don't have to worry so much about the oil pump issues and the sumping like they're having with the Milwaukee 8s from 2017 to roughly the late 2019 model. So that is really something to think about if you're looking at getting an M8, or if you should just go ahead and get a 103 with the HO in it. Now, of course, trying to compare the 103 HO to the Milwaukee 8 114, 117, that's really starting to gap it quite a bit right there. But if you really are stuck between a 103 or a 107 Milwaukee 8, I would really highly consider what you would need to do to the Milwaukee 8 to ensure its reliability versus the 103 HO. As I mentioned, the late model 103 HOs were pretty dang good. They really didn't have a whole lot of issues. But if you're looking at a 114, your stock horsepower is going to be about 86 horsepower, and you're going to be pulling about 107 foot-pounds of torque. So right there, you're really starting to see that gap where that displacement comes in. So really the only difference on the 103 motors between the 103 and the 103 high output is just the cam. So if you have an earlier model that's before the Rushmore project and it's just the 103, the only difference is the cams. So if you want to say throw in a Wood 222 into your pre-2014 bagger with the 103 in it, you're making torque and horsepower that's pretty much well in line with the 107, and the torque is more in line with the 114. So even with a Wood 222 and a good exhaust, you're looking at roughly about 94 horsepower and 112 foot-pounds of torque. So guys, when it comes down to it, don't count out the old twin cam 103s. Those are still good, strong, solid engines, even compared to the Milwaukee 8. Now, of course, when it comes to the Milwaukee 8 versus the twin cam 103, it's really going to come down to your personal preference and what you feel better on. For me personally, I like the Milwaukee 8. I like some of the new features on it. I like some of the horsepower and torque output numbers on it. But what I don't like is I don't like the feel of the new bikes. That's just personal to me. I'm more partial to the twin cams when it comes to just how the motorcycles feel with the rubber mounting system versus that new counterbalance rigid mounted system that they're using with the Milwaukee 8. Now, when it comes to Milwaukee 8s, you are going to have 3 different flavors right out of the factory, especially now that you can get a 117 in a non-CVO model. Of course, you know you got the 107, the 114, and that new 117, and then you could also order a 131 crate engine. But I often get asked, what is the difference between those 3 Milwaukee 8 engines? Well, in a nutshell, the 107, it has the shorter stroke and a little bit smaller bore. Now, the bore on the 107 is 3.937 inches, and the stroke is going to be 4.375 inches. The 107 is the only engine that they do this on. Now, the 114 and the 117, they do share the same 4.5-inch stroke crank. The only difference there is just a little difference in bore size. The 114 has 4.016-inch bore, and the 117 is going to have 4.075-inch bore. Now, between these 3 engines, the torque is still pretty close. Now, surprisingly, the big difference between the 3 Milwaukee 8 varieties is going to be their horsepower. Now, the 107 generally comes in at about 98 foot-pounds of torque, and then you're looking at the 114, you're getting about 107, and then on a stock 117, you're getting about 110 foot-pounds of torque. Of course, these are just very relative dyno numbers that doesn't really apply to the real world in a lot of cases. Now, you guys with the Screamin Eagle 110s, these bikes right here, they are putting down very, very good horsepower numbers, upwards of 90, 95 horsepower, and in some cases, you're looking at torque about 110 to 112 foot-pounds, bone stock. And that right there, to me, that's right up there with the new 117. So guys, if you already have a 103 powered bike, really the only thing that you've got to do to it, instead of trading it in, is just go ahead and put you a good set of cams in it. You put a set of cams in this, and it's going to put you right up there with the horsepower numbers of those Milwaukee 8s. Now, granted, if you run up against somebody that's got a Milwaukee 8, that they have a cam in that bike, Well, it's going to be pretty ugly because once you put a cam in a Milwaukee 8, they really come to life and they really start taking advantage of that 4-valve head. But once again, on a Harley, we're not out racing. Well, most of us aren't. But if you are, you better have a really hot twin cam to go up against a built Milwaukee 8. So really, guys, in the end, the 103s, they're really not that far off the 107s or even the 114s with their stock power. And not to mention, the twin cams, they have a lot better thump to them at the idle than the Milwaukee 8s do. Now, with the Milwaukee 8, getting a cam in that thing and making the idle chop and sound a lot better like a Harley should, that's almost a necessity with those motors. Guys, let me know in the comments, which engine would you prefer? Would you prefer a twin cam 103 or would you prefer to go with a Milwaukee 8? But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. Please don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing to the channel. And please don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. But anyhow, guys, until next week, you guys stay safe on the streets, ride smart, dodge the cars, and I'll catch you back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.